talking about the odyssey of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, which disappeared over a week ago on its way from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia to Beijing, China. As we recorded this broadcast Friday morning, the fate of that airline remained unknown. No matter what the outcome, though, many questions remain about this ill-fated flight and its passengers and crew. What legal rights do they and their families have? Could the airline be sued over what happened? Joining us now is attorney John Gismondi, principal of Gismondi and Associates, and back with us is former U.S. Airways pilot and NASA engineer, also visiting professor of aerospace engineering at West Virginia University, Dr. Peter Gall. John, thank you for being here. Welcome to you. Tell us very quickly about your connection with U.S. Airways Flight 427 back in 1994.
Sure, I was one of the lead counsel on the so-called steering committee. That was a very, very lengthy investigation. It was a difficult accident to solve, but this one, frankly, will make U.S. Air Flight 427 look like child's play in trying to solve. I think this is going to go down. I think it already has the earmarks of being maybe the most challenging investigation that the NTSB has ever had.
Just to remind people, Flight 427 was a domestic flight from Chicago, nearing Pittsburgh International on approach, crashing in Hopewell. You had all of the pieces there.
You did.
And still, it takes a long time.
It took 2 years.
Right. So knowing what you know about an investigation of that nature, when you think about what is going to have to be done in this case, it must boggle your mind.
It is, Kenny. It is light years. As you said, in 427, you had all of the debris there. You immediately got the flight data recorder. Here, this isn't just looking for a needle in a haystack. We don't even know where the haystack is. Is it the South, the South China Sea? Is it the Indian Ocean? Is there any debris? If the debris has now sunk to the bottom of the ocean, the retrieval itself, even if you locate it, is very, very difficult. It is light years from the typical crash that we see on hard terrain, and it's going to be a very daunting task to locate the aircraft and then figure out exactly what happened.
Right. I want to get back to you and talk about the legal issues in a moment, but Dr. Gall, I want to put the question to you very simply. You know, we've talked about all these little pieces of evidence. Sometimes they're quickly debunked, but, you know, we just have these streams of suggestions coming in. As we sit here today, have you worked out a theory in your mind as to what you think happened?
I have a theory of a possibility.
Spell it out for us.
Well, the ACARS communication system was shut down at 107. Minutes later, the transponder was shut down. Chances are, if there was any kind of an emergency on board, instead of the pilots shutting off the transponder, they would put a emergency code in the transponder. We have a code that tells the controllers we are in trouble. And if they were indeed in trouble, they would do a 180 and attempt to return to the airport. None of that happened. It looks like it may have been intervention of some sort.
Intervention of some sort, like bad guys hijacking, right?
Well, I don't... Let's say, for example, one of the pilots wanted to do something radical. Typically, once you get up to your cruising altitude, one of the pilots may go to the restroom. The other pilot could secure the door and theoretically take control of the aircraft single-handedly.
But the one thing that doesn't sort of make sense here, and I agree with everything that's said, it certainly points to somebody intentionally turning off communication devices. The fact, if it was a catastrophic event where the plane was in trouble, you would think that the natural instinct of the pilot is to go back to the nearest airport. They didn't do that. They make a left turn out over the Indian Ocean. The one thing that's baffling to me, though, is this. If somebody was smart enough to know how to disable the plane and whatever, they would also know what the ultimate cruising range of the aircraft is, given the fuel that's on board. Yet when you head out over the Indian Ocean, where are you going to go? They were on a flight path that was going to put them down in the ocean somewhere. And you say to yourself, if the pilot was intent on doing something, suicide or whatever, he could have done that in the Gulf of Thailand. Why did they make this left turn and head out over the Indian Ocean, which appears to be the case? And as I said, everything does point to it being acts, intentional acts. But if they're wise enough to do those things, why wouldn't they be wise enough to know the cruising range of the aircraft?
Is there any land that they could get to land some kind of crash landing? And I mean,
Highly unlikely
Right.
that you could land a Boeing 777 on a runway and not be noticed.
Right,
You need
right.
a 10,000-foot runway,
yeah.
and obviously a lot of people have to operate an airport like that.
I've also read about airlines having a certain type of beacon that is supposed to send out a signal if there's a water landing. No such notification in this case, as far as we know.
Yes, there is something called an emergency locator transmitter, and if the aircraft impacts the ground, it will go off and send an emergency signal. It also can be turned on manually. It has a battery life of 30 days. But back to what he was saying, if you wanted to ditch the airplane, the water in the region where they were flying is about, I believe, 300 feet deep. The Indian Ocean is about 15,000 feet deep. So if you wanted to put an airplane underwater, you would put it under 15,000 feet of water.
And you know, we can speculate for days and
Yes,
weeks,
and this is
but the
speculation.
reality
Sure,
is,
of course.
the most important thing, if that day comes, is going to be the location of the flight data recorder. I mean, there is nothing that will approach the amount of data that will be in that device, but finding it and getting it back, if it's at the bottom of the ocean, is going to be extremely challenging. But that single device really holds the best clues that we'll ever obtain anywhere.
Right, but are we going to find it?
Well, that's a good point. With Air France 447,
Which is
there
the one
was
between Rio de Janeiro and...
yes, that they hit the water, impacted the water at a high rate of speed. The aircraft broke up and sunk in that location. They knew exactly where it sunk, give or take.
Right.
In this case, nobody knows
Right.
where it is.
Yet, yeah.
And that flight data recorder only emits a sound, if you will, for several days or weeks, but not indefinitely. And with the expanse that this search has to cover, who's to know how long it might be before they can locate anything? And then, as mentioned, the depth of the Indian Ocean, if that's where it is, presents tremendous issues. They will probably utilize somebody such as the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, the people involved in getting the Titanic. It's going to be that sophisticated an operation, probably unlike anything we've seen in aviation before.
What does it suggest to you that there's been no floating debris? Does that suggest that the plane I assume it suggests the plane hit the water intact, if indeed it hit the water.
If if it hits the water abruptly, it would break up and there would be floating debris. Most of the debris would sink to the bottom, the metal and so forth, but there is a lot of stuff in these airplanes that will float. It could be out there somewhere floating, but very hard to find in a vast ocean.
Well, as the search continues to get wider and more assets are deployed.
And the currents will move the debris
Right.
and spread it.
Right.
So time is of the essence.
Just a couple of minutes ago, liability issues that come to mind for you based on your experience.
Yeah, I think if it is human intervention, an intentional act, I think you're going to look at two things. If it was the pilots, it's going to go to the background check. What did the airline know about their own employees? If it was somebody other than the pilots who committed the intentional act, somebody got access to the cockpit, then it's going to be a screening issue. About how did so-and-so get on board. I think right now, if you had to guess, I think people are leaning more toward an act of the pilot. And if that's so, then it's going to go to the airline itself and their screening procedures, what they knew and didn't know about their own employees. That's where it's going to focus, again, assuming it's an intentional act.
And as one who has dealt with the families connected to these kinds of tragedies, impossible to conceive what it's like not knowing.
Not knowing this and the length of time that's going to be involved here between the act and when you do know something makes it just it's interminable. It really is. It's very, very difficult for families to deal with the unknown for days, weeks on end, as it looks like this is headed toward.
Just about 30 seconds to go. I want to ask you the final question.
Sure, Ken.
Boeing 777, good safety record, right?
Excellent airplane.
Filled with redundant safety systems as well, right?
State of the art.
So what's the very next thing you expect we're getting? The next significant piece of information will be something, some piece of something.
I guess the next biggest find will be locating the signals from the black boxes, flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder.
Meantime, the world waits for more information.
Yes.
Dr. Peter Gall, John Guzmani, thank you so much. We'll take a break. Back with some final thoughts in just a moment.
With all the unrest